Welcome to Architrave Gaming. I'm the Archmaster. So, today we are going to the first of the 4 quadrants of what makes the collaborative dream experience. And yes, I have a better name for it, but I'll tell you at the end. Not the end of this video, at the end of the series. We're looking at the first quadrant of what makes the collaborative dream experience. And looking at what makes it good. The first quadrant is the believability of the world, the simulation, the verisimilitude. If you'll notice, the first 3 quadrants, the verisimilitude and believability of the world itself. Secondly, the adventure game itself, the stuff you do, right? And then the story, the characters and whatnot, that vaguely resembles exploration, combat, and social interaction. Exploration of the world, right? The real seeming believable world. Next, you have the combat, which is similar to the adventure game. It's the thing you do. And even in D&D 5e, they say, oh, here are the 3 pillars of adventure: exploration, combat, and social interaction. Well, the social interaction isn't so much part of the adventure game as it is part of the storytelling. And although it's both, it's part in one, part in the other. And then the exploration itself, 5e has very few gamified mechanics for exploration. In old school, they used to have a lot more. They used to have procedures and stuff for like delving the dungeon, and every 10 feet you did a thing. They used to have a lot more gamified procedures. But in modern D&D and 5e, they really don't. So the exploration of the game is pretty much just in the simulation toolbox. It's really not so much part of the game itself. You'll see this this pattern exemplified in all of the stuff I'm talking about. Everything is 4. You have your freedom, power, status, and mystery, which if you've seen previous videos, you know about. Those are pretty much the seeds, the starting point for all of the other stuff here. That's where you get your exploration, combat, social interaction, and plot. Not GM plot, enemy plot. That's the mystery. That's who someone is plotting something, and you have to figure it out. It's also the basis for the simulation of the world, which is the thing you explore with freedom. The power, which is your adventure game itself, the thing you accomplish, the thing you do, you beat the game. That's the the combat is the main example of the adventure game itself, and the power. Like 90% of the rules in the adventure game are about combat. You have the social interaction, the characters, and status. It's it's your relationship with people, and then you have mystery, the plot, the deep connection to the characters. Like here's the villain, here's the whatnot. And to your own character mostly. So yeah, it all lines up 4 every single time. And being aware of that framework will help you a lot to understand everything I'm about to say. All right, so yeah, old school gamified the simulation. We already went over that. If you've ever wondered what the initial, like the actual bare bones substance of what exploration is, it's asking questions. The players asking questions. That is essentially exploration. In the bare bones of combat is when the players are like rolling dice and making attacks and whatnot, casting spells, killing their enemies. In exploration, it is the players asking questions. And the reason why that is it's essentially replacing their 5 senses. In the real world, when we go out and explore, we're using our 5 senses to explore. The player doesn't have 5 senses in the game world, right? They can't actually see, touch, taste, smell, or hear anything. They only know what the GM tells them. So for a player, their main way of exploring the world is actually just asking questions. And that's something that you don't need to gamify. That's why there aren't a lot of exploration mechanics in adventure games and RPGs and whatever you want to call them. It's because you don't need it. It's just exploration. It's just asking questions. That's just, okay, so, how big is the room? How tall is the ceiling? Is there any furnishings, etc.? You're just asking questions and the GM is just telling you. That's exploration. If players are like, I want more exploration mechanics, it's like, well, ask more questions. That is you exploring the world. That's you, when you say, hey, is there a chandelier in the room? You're telling me your character is looking up at the ceiling, right? You're exploring the world. You're looking for something, right? That's the actual meat and bones of it. Another mechanic of exploration is a physical thing players do in the real world. It's mapping. And of course, this isn't done in new school very much. It's done in OSR, in old school gaming more. But you actually, the GM describes, all right, there's a 30-foot corridor that extends, far in front of you, and there's a passage that takes a left turn, and then there's like a cave-in the north wall. And so you have graph paper and you're drawing that. That is exploration. That is the mechanic of exploration. But even then, that's not really mechanicified. It's not gamified. It's not a game. That's just, as I mentioned in the previous video, just the simulation of the world, the exploration, the simulation toolbox. It's all right, here's how big the world is, right? You're not really playing a game at that point. You're just, making a map, right? Simulation is actually really good. 5e doesn't have enough simulation. They really don't. The simulation they have is just bad, like, oh, you regain all your health when you sleep. That breaks all immersion. That totally wakes you up from the dream. That's not even a lucid dream. That's just waking up from the dream. It's ridiculous. And there are a lot more like that. Their economy is absolutely broken. There's so many things that just don't make sense. Everyone is so magical all the time. And it's like, well, the societies would be completely different if every elf was born with 2 cantrips, right? Like, that's... it's just too much. The believability of the world is just wrecked in 5e. But simulation leads to the believability of the world and immersion, and therefore fun. Something like Red Dead Redemption 2 being very immersive actually made it more fun because it was more believable. The combat in that game was great, by the way, but the simulation of the world, the accurate simulation of the world, where it's believable, actually contributes to the fun of the game because you feel like you're actually there and you're not just playing a game. It's in Call of Duty, right? Here's an example of why you need simulation. In Call of Duty, technically, the game thing itself is there is a dot on your screen that's moving, and you must move the dot in the center of your screen onto that moving dot and click a button. Every time you do that, bing, you win. That's really the game. You could strip all the graphics out of Call of Duty and just have it like big floating red circles or like meshes, like polygons and stuff, just like floating around. And you can just look up and, no animations, no like feet jumping or moving, just dots moving around. And you're just looking at them and clicking them as quick as you can. That's technically the game of Call of Duty. You're just clicking things as quickly as you can. It's the graphics of, oh, it's a person, it's a military man, you're in a war zone. It's the immersion, it's the simulation that leads to the immersion that actually makes the shooting more fun. It makes the game more fun. The game itself, in my opinion, isn't that fun. Just clicking dots on the screen when you're told to, not for me. But if you put, like, oh, you're in a war zone, there's a simulation, it's believable, that makes it a lot more fun, doesn't it? So that's why it's absolutely essential to have a good simulation. It leads to believability and immersion in the world itself, and it enhances the game part. Because in 5e, I don't think the game part's actually very good. The combat, exploration, it's not super great. But the simulation, not that they do a good job, but my system, I do a good job. The simulation, hey, you're in a fantasy world. It's fantastic. Here's the altered gravity. Here's the magical zones. Here's the natural magic. Here's the magic innate to weather and time and the ground and seasons and people. Like, the simulation makes the game part, where you delve into dungeons or ancient ruins or fight dragons, blah, blah, blah. It makes the game part actually much more fun because you're not just... the game part all by itself is simply the GM say, hey, there's a target number 15. Roll and add your modifiers. You roll, oh, you win. That's it. That's the game part. The simulation part is there is a red dragon in front of you. He breathes a breath attack, right? That's simulation. And then he's like, I need a DC 17 con save. That is the game. You switched from simulation to game when you started rolling the dice, because that's the actual game part. And then you go back to simulation. Oh, you died. Like he burned you up with his fire. And then you go to the game part, mark your HP to 0. You're switching between them. That's not one thing. You have simulation and game. They're beautifully married, not in 5e. It's a wreck of a marriage, but it's supposed to be beautifully married. And there are plenty of games out there that have, good simulation that match with the gameplay and they enhance each other. And they do such a good job that most people don't even see the difference. It's like, and the two shall become one flesh. It's like, yeah, the simulation and the game actually become one. So a lot of people don't even realize they're two different things anymore, right? But they are. If you have a game designer mind, you're like, oh, I see those are two different things. Anyway, we actually like simulation in our game. It's why we have actual encumbrance rules, and it's slot encumbrance. It's very simple. You're not doing any math or counting up weight. In 5e, you have to write down longsword somewhere anyway, right? I just have 6 different slots, and you write longsword in one of the slots. You're not doing anything that you wouldn't do, and no, you have more than 6 slots, don't worry. But you're not really doing anything that you wouldn't do normally. It's just every time you write down an item, it fills a specific slot, and you only have so many slots, right? So, the simulation of it, you have to actually have rations. Resting does not regain all your HP. It doesn't give you all your spells back. It doesn't give you all your aspects and resources back, right? The simulation is, harsher, more realistic, but it's more believable, and it actually makes the game more fun. Just asked my players last night. 5 of my 6 players all decided to play the same class, the Skulk, and that was interesting. So here's just another small example of a decision that you would make as a game designer to actually increase the simulation of the game and lessen the gamified, right? There's the simulation and the gamified, and I'll actually get into that probably in the next video about when to simulate and when to gamify. Or rather not, it's when to simulate, when to gamify and when to do anything else. That is a future video. Anyway, here, if you are designing your game and there's an effect like, a levitation effect, and it lasts 30 seconds, and in game that's, 5 rounds. Which one do you say? Do you tell the players, all right, this effect lasts 30 seconds or this effect lasts 5 rounds? I say 30 seconds because that is the thing that the player is actually familiar with. You keep the immersion, you keep the dream active, where it's like, oh, this thing lasts for 30 seconds. That's what his character would think in the world. That's what the player is familiar with. That's the actual, like, oh, it lasts 30 seconds. That's something that would actually happen in the world, something you would say in the world. But 5 rounds, people don't talk about rounds in the world. That breaks the immersion. That pulls you out of it. It breaks the simulation, right? That's why, that's one reason D&D in the 2014 edition was actually so popular, is because they used natural language like that. They said 30 seconds, 6 days, you are knocked prone. In the new one, they went backward and they said, you have the prone condition. That's breaking you out of the immersion. We all know what it means to be knocked prone, but that's breaking you out of the immersion. Say you have the prone condition. Now you're talking about a game mechanic, right? They succeeded in 5th edition, in 2014, when they very seamlessly melded the simulation with common language. They melded the simulation of common language with the game itself. Being knocked prone meant there was a specific prone condition, and when you, like, oh, you are stunned, means you have the stun condition. They didn't have to say condition, they just said you are stunned, and you knew that meant you had the stunned condition. So it let you seamlessly pass between the immersion, so you're still asleep in that dream, right? You're still, in there, with, now I have to maybe peek one eye open and play the game, but then I'm back in the dream, right? That was actually really good. That's why it's been so popular, is because there was an easy transition. In their new edition and in lots of other games, there's so many game mechanics. It's so mechanic heavy. I haven't played Pathfinder, but I think Pathfinder is like this. It's why it doesn't appeal to some people. They may have nailed the game part down. From all accounts, the game part of Pathfinder is loads better than the game part, the actual adventure game part of D&D, right? Their simulation might even be better than D&D's simulation, right? But when they don't use common language, or when they have just too many rules for too many things, it wrecks the immersion. And now you're sitting down, you feel like you're just playing an adventure game the whole time, and you don't really feel like you're in another world. You don't really feel immersed in it, right? So, yeah, I think that's enough for this video. I have a few more points to make on the topic of exploration, and then we'll move on to combat, or, this is the quadrant of simulation, and then we'll move on to the quadrant of the adventure game. I have a lot to say about adventure and the actual nature of adventure and what it's supposed to be, and I know I have a commenter in there who's gonna fight me over it, and I'm so looking forward to it. Anyway, thanks for watching. Feed the algorithm. The YouTube pleasantries go a long way, and have a good day. God bless.